All right, there we are. Hey, everybody, welcome to episode number 2 of The Healthy Dose. I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, and thank you for joining. This is a bit new for me. I haven't done what you might call what looks like a podcast. You know, you've heard of my daily dose. I do that in the mornings early, and this is the second episode. So before I introduce today's guest, let me just share with you a bit of why I'm doing this, the mission, and then we'll take it from there. So the mission is really quite simple. It's having enjoyed connecting with and being encouraged by so many people of faith over the past several years, and even some even in the recent months, to say the least, is as just something that I'm realizing that not only is my life being changed by others, but I see a lot of the fruit of the lives that are being changed all over the place, just from mentorship to coaching to friends, family, and everything. So I just wanted to take a step up, to a higher level. And I really feel God's been calling me to make another step closer to Him by helping to bring more people closer towards Him as well with that. And so while this platform is really still in its infancy stages, I know one of the best ways to reach more people for Jesus on a larger scale is to look at other fellow believers and what they're doing and the challenges and struggles and the things that they've overcome, so that if you're maybe going through something right now or in the future, that you have maybe some backup. You have heard some stories, you have some encouragement from other believers who may have gone through those challenges and maybe can save you some of the struggles that you're going through, or at least to help, I guess, so to speak, make the blow a little less severe. So with this reminder too, The Healthy Dose is a completely free show. And like always, I say it most likely will be a free advertising, none of that kind of stuff. I don't see how this is really a money-making type tool other than just to provide some value and some insight and an opportunity for me to learn from others, as well as to provide value to you. So with that, I'm just super, super grateful for any and all of you, whether this is your first time listening to me or to this broadcast, or if you've been following me for years. I'm just super, super thankful for you and really grateful that you've taken the time, because I know there's a lot of people that are screaming for your attention in this world, and for you to take the time out of your probably really busy day, I know that's a lot of effort, and I do want to just say that I appreciate it. So if you're new here, that's awesome. We are too. In fact, this is our second episode. And whether your faith is strong or not, let me ask you this question. Wouldn't it be awesome if you knew how to live a faith-filled, healthy, and fit life so that you can pursue all that the Lord has set out for you and His plan for your life and the life of your family? Well, today I'm honored to introduce today's guest, and who I've had the privilege of meeting a little over a year and a half ago, at a live business mastermind event. You can call it a mastermind event by my business mentor was putting on in Vancouver. It's my very first time to Vancouver. And Luciano Del Monte is known to many of us as Luch or Papa Luch. I don't know if you prefer one or the other. If it's an honor, if I can call you Papa Luch. And he's invested truly his life in bringing the best out of people, whether as a high school teacher, as a minister in various faith communities, with particular emphasis on young adults, and as a life and leadership coach for over the past decade. He's partnered with his entrepreneur son, Vince Del Monte, who happens to be my business coach in providing foundational life skills for guys like me. So I just want to share this. When I first met Luch and his beautiful wife, Rosetta, at the first mastermind event that I went to, truly when I got introduced to him and his wife for the very first time, I really it was automatic. It was like I was a part of their family. It was really, truly an awesome experience. And never being a part of a mastermind group or going to Vancouver or being new to this whole world of online coaching, it was really awesome to be really, truly welcomed into the family. And as one of the other moments, I just felt that God was intentionally putting, and I don't know if you felt this before, God has an interesting way of putting people across your paths and in your life. And one of the things I don't want to do is to just keep it to myself. I think He also uses people to come into our lives to also share with others those experiences. So today, Luch and I are going to have a conversation about faith, family, and the importance of leadership, both on a giving and a receiving end. And ultimately for you, we hope our discussion just helps you on your path to pursuing a faith-filled, healthy, fit life so that you can carry out all God's plan for your life and to be able to do that to your best of ability. So those are just some of the big themes we're going to tackle on today. And without further ado, let me just welcome to the healthy dose. I want to say daily dose, the healthy dose, Luciano Del Monte.
To be here. Great to be here. Appreciate it, Mark. Appreciate those kind words. I wondered who you were talking about.
It's so let's start here. Let's start with kind of early days of like back in the day. I'd love to know kind of early lifestyle. No, maybe we have a lot to talk about there, but just in general, give us a little background of context of life growing up.
Sure. My background is I like to say I'm a Canadian-born Italian. Came from immigrant parents, and they came over from Italy right after the war. So was born in '53. So you can do the math. I'm up there. I'm considered a senior, and in this COVID world, I'm considered vulnerable, but I don't feel vulnerable at all. I feel like I'm victorious. So I don't want anybody to define who I am besides my good Lord and the people who love me. But the early years were, my parents didn't come from wealth, so life was tough, but I felt a lot of love in my early days. I struggled through school. I struggled with academics. I struggled. When I think of, I have so much empathy for kids who struggle in school, especially the early years. And that's why I believe in education. I believe in the basics. I didn't get the basics early on. So I struggled. Fortunately, I had a little bit of athleticism, which I didn't even know, more in the arena of endurance sports. So in middle school, I guess that would be like the 8th, 9th grade, I went out for the cross country for a running meet. It wasn't even on a track. It was just a run in the June track and field days. And I ended up running to the point where I won. I guess I killed myself, but I won the race. Awesome. And then it was on then they let me run again on a 400-meter track. And I actually ran the mile with no training in about 5 minutes. The local high school coach came up to me and he says, "Where are you going to school next year?" And I said, "I'm going to this school, William Lyon Mackenzie." He said, "You're going to do sports?" I says, "Yeah, I'm going to play soccer and football." He says, "No, you're not. I'm going to make you a track star." Long story short, his name's Jim Parker. I'll never forget him. If I ever write a book, I'll write it about Jim. But he came alongside. He was a physics professor with a track and field background, and he loved spotting raw talent. And he said, "I'm going to help you become an endurance runner." So I never got my football equipment or my soccer equipment. I started running cross country. I was the only member of the cross country team. Year one, I stumbled through all these races, but by year two, I was up in the top 4 or 5 in our division, or like kind of before you go to state. And year three, I was being sought out by University of Wyoming on a track scholarship. So I got through high school barely, but athletics helped me get into college, university. So I went to the States, ran well for a while. I got injured, and then my scholarship just fell apart. My life fell apart in my first year, and I came back to Canada with my head between my legs. And the only good thing that happened my first year back was I enrolled in the university, totally lost, but I met my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and she was my first savior. So,
awesome.
And while we were students and we were in our Italian class together, we took it as an elective. We both inadvertently met the Lord through a campus organization called the Navigators, who I work for today. And they began to coach us and disciple us into the faith. And so that was the early days. But I'll never forget this Mr. Parker, Jim Parker. In fact, I saw him a few years ago because my youngest son, went to the same university I went to. And I went up to him. Now he's a lot older, and so am I. And I said, "Do you remember who I am?" He says, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Lucy." They used to call me Lucky Lucy. Lucy, you lost your hair. I said, "Yeah." And I said, "You know what?" And I started crying. I said, "You changed my life. If it wasn't for you, I never would have gotten out of high school. I have a brother who died of drug addiction, and I could have gone down that same path, but athletics got me out of it. And particularly this man who saw something in me I didn't even know was there." So those were the early years. I think that's where the seeds were planted for me to be a coach someday. But before that, I became a teacher, and then I was a pastor in churches for many years. And now I show up in the world as a coach, life and leadership coach.
Yeah, that's a quite a history. I'll say is, so you would say that track coach was really like your first coach? Like was he your only coach you had? That one coach?
Yeah. Well, I had some soccer coaches, Italian guys, like the old really good coaches, but I knew I didn't have any future in soccer, and track, if anything, it just got me out of the thought that I was no good. I wasn't good at anything. That someone would actually pay for me to go to school, and just made me feel really good. And even had aspirations of the Olympics, which never came true, but it still helped me to start dreaming. This little flicker of hope became a bit of a fire, and then it was doused due to an injury that got me out of the scholarship. And then I had to meet a whole new set of people. But I began to realize early on that people were a key. Good people were a key to my success, whatever my success was going to be.
Yeah, and you found the love of your life would happen to be good people.
Well, she was
Hung on to her.
She was, yeah. I mean, I leaned on that girl. But today we have an equal partnership.
So how many years have you been married now?
44.
Oh my goodness, that's
and
awesome.
we happen to be married, but we're still best friends.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Whenever I officiate weddings, I like to tell people it's easy to leave your spouse, but it's hard to leave your best friend.
100%. 100%. Now, let me ask you this, just back in your history, growing up, was there faith in your life growing up in your family?
Yeah, well, I grew up nominally Catholic. I mean, when I look back, I'm really grateful that my parents took me to the church to be baptized, to get all the sacraments, even though God was always in the back of my mind, but he was there, he, she, whatever, but it's a he to me. And it's kind of like, the way I liken it is, it was like a credit card that wasn't activated. Mm-hmm. Everybody comes to faith in different ways. Some come through formal ways like I did. And then I met a group that kind of lit the match, helped me light the match, which was call in and say, I'd like to activate my card. And that was the point of decision where the guy actually asked me, I used to wear crucifixes like this one. And the guy asked me one day, he says, you know what that cross represents? I said, yeah, Jesus died. Yeah, but you know what it means? I said, well, sort of. He said, well, you either do or you don't. Then he began to explain to me that Jesus, it looks like a plus sign. And without the cross, it was a minus. And I identified with that I felt like a minus most of my life. And I was always trying to catch up to everybody. And he said, Jesus adds value to your life. He's knocking at the door of your heart. So at age 20, I remember the day, it was October 6, 1974. I remember the day he boldly asked me, would you like to receive Jesus? I said, I don't even know what that means. All I knew was I started to sweat. I was sweating, my heart was racing, and I thought, if I don't say yes, this is going to keep happening. So I said, yeah, I would. And he says, okay, well, I'll lead you through a little prayer. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I'll just say a little prayer, and I want to tell God you're sorry for your sins. And you want, if you do believe in Jesus in a personal way, then admit and acknowledge that, and then ask him to come into your heart. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And no word of a lie, I did it. My heart calmed down, my sweat stopped, and a peace came over me. And I remember telling my wife, my girlfriend at the time, I said, Rosetta, as we left their house that day, I said, I think I have eternal life. I think I have Jesus. And she said, oh no, what have they done to my Luch? Because she knew they were religious people.
Sure.
And she knew I was not religious. I was a secular Catholic at best. And that from that day on, again, someone came into my life after that and began to mentor me in the spiritual dimension of my life. Jim helped mentor me in the area of my physical athletics. And this guy, Brian Thatcher, began to mentor me in the area of my spiritual life that was dormant, to be honest.
That's awesome. I resonate when you say the credit card, because I felt like it's kind of similar for me when I was in my really 30s. And it was almost like, well, when do you need a credit card? Well, I know one of the times I needed it when I moved to New York City and I didn't have $1 to my name and I had to dump it all on a credit card. And I never felt so nervous in my whole life because I had really, first time I was out of college, I needed to find a place to live and I didn't have money. I had a job, but I didn't have any money and it required credit card and I went into debt. on that credit card, but I had to like start it right. I remember I was so scared. And it's interesting you say that because although I didn't feel it was a bit of a credit card for me, I feel like I was in still that, even though I was out of that financial debt, when my son was unhealthy and that was how we came to the Lord, it was like, I felt like there was something missing. And
Right.
there's a bit of a debt, right? So for us, same thing. We grew up Catholic, my wife and I both, and before we knew each other and just weren't really pursuing. But I always felt like there was this little whisper. Now I look back and think back of the people that were in my life, of these coaches in my life and friends in my life who weren't necessarily believers, or just they were positive, encouraging people. And I wanted to be around them. I wanted to have more of that. And then I realized, okay, that's a good thing, but there's even a better thing. And I didn't realize that until, for me, it was in my, when I was in my mid late 30s and we started a family and had kind of our whole world turned upside down, where I needed to use the, so to speak, credit card to make a purchase. I realized that purchase was already done, so to speak, as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Hearing the gospel for the first time was really amazing. It's interesting that you had that. So let me ask you this: in the leadership part of it, what got you started helping others on your leadership journey, like from your age, being led by somebody else to starting to lead others?
Well, I was in my early years, the first guy who was really a leader in my life was this guy who helped me grow spiritually in the early days. But he also had a lot of dysfunction in his life. Like sometimes leaders are wounded themselves. And back in the early 70s, we didn't know that language of brokenness and woundedness. And people were this is why I've come to see that leadership is all about, for me, it's about character and it's about relationships. Competence is part of it, but if all you have is competence, you can really hurt people. So this guy, I learned leadership from him about focus, about the task. But the Bible says, since this is a faith-filled program, leadership is about two things. And David says in Psalm 78, God says this about David, King David. So he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them with his skillful hands. So there's two components to leadership. Leaders shepherd people. There's a care component, but then there's a skill side. And so I realized that when you lead people out of your own emptiness, the vacuum in your own life, you actually end up using them to meet your needs. And so even though this man really helped me, he not only transferred his strengths to me, he transferred some of his own brokenness. Because I began in the early years to lead people, and I think I had good intentions, but because I didn't deal with the under the hood stuff, you know what I mean by that? I had issues in my own life that were unresolved for years. And we got married early. I was a Christian. My wife and I had been a Christian for about a year and a half, and we got married. So most of my Christian life has been lived married. Right? I lived a lot of years. 44 of my 63 years have been married, and I've been a Christian 45 of those. So that's how you know what I mean? So for me, leadership is about character, and it's about relationships. It's about, to me, the best leaders are the people who thank people, they appreciate people, they bless people, and yes, they provide a path forward for them. They help them to discern where they are. Like God's a great leader. God says to Adam, when Adam's lost in the garden, whether this is literal or a metaphor, it's a story that me matters a lot. God says to Adam, where are you? Well, God knows where he is, but he wants to know, Adam, do you know where you are? Right now, do you know where you are? Not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally. So leaders help you do that. And I think the best leaders have identified or are identifying their own stuff that gets in the way of really helping people. See, Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. He didn't say, I've come that you may have life and I'll have it to the full. Like I'm going to have all my needs met by you doing what I want you to do. Like it's all about you. When I'm leading, it's all about you. And it can become all about the task. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here because you show up in the world as a very strong, caring person. I think you have that bent, Mark, big time. Like you want people to know right from the bottom of your heart that I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm just here to help. If I can help you take the next step. I think a lot of people would say that about Mark Havens.
Well, I appreciate that. And, as a new Christian, it definitely wasn't I was that person that, it was almost where I was thinking, I'm not really good under the hood right now, but I see people who are, and I'm attracted to that.
Yeah.
I want to know what that entails. Does it entail I have to serve? Do I have to go on mission trips? Do I have to, tithe? Do I have to give money to the church now? These are all things that come up, right? And I didn't know what any of that really meant prior to kind of starting this whole path down being a Christian and what it looks like. And then I thought, like, well, I don't know how to pray. I hear people praying out loud and they're so, eloquent in their speech. And then somebody had taught me, and it happened to be a coach, or well, it was a leader, just a mentor of mine, and said, "Do you realize he already knows what you're going to pray for before you even pray your prayers?" It's not so much of the fact that you are so eloquent in what you're praying for, but he wants you to talk to him, is what he's saying. He wants you to have that relationship. That's what it's about. So for me, again, it's 10 years in the process. I still feel like I'm a work in progress. I'm still, I think the easy thing too is that even if you start on this faith journey and you're on fire, so to speak, for the Lord, versus, like, let's just say the other word people use is a lukewarm Christian, right? Like, I always feel like I've never been disappointed when I've been on fire for him. Anytime that I'm encouraged by him and for other people, and to me, people that are like you, are just like, you inspire me, and like your son Vince, who's bold in his faith and his business, is like, that makes me want to add more gasoline to the fire, if that makes sense. Versus the other direction is just becoming that Sunday Christian, who you've seen, unfortunately, a lot of those, not to knock it, but there's a lot of those Sunday Christians that are struggling right now because they don't have church right now. They're watching it on their TVs versus having that connection with people, which obviously is a really good thing, but isn't the only thing, right? It's only one part of that step in faith. So that's why I felt the desire to do this, the daily show. I was inspired by your son, my mentor, who said, you know what? Be there for people even more than just for their weight loss challenges and their fitness and coaching. And then it's like, okay, yes, and it's interesting because as I do these, I think maybe one of the most inspired people from doing this, I get, not because of what I'm doing, because I'm inspired of meeting and being around people like you, and even people in my coaching community. And I'm sure you have the same, as far as like, just, I feel like I'm being led by so many people right now. And I know there's a lot of people who don't have good leadership. Like, there's nobody leading them. They're stuck at home. All they're doing is eyes are glued on the news. They're already afraid, and then getting locked down and being, forced to stay at home for 4 months has even made them more in a fear-based. And I feel bad for them, especially for the ones that don't have somebody they can lean on, a heavenly Father who can take you through any of the mess, any of the storm. And I talk to my wife and I say, gosh, I said, I can't imagine people. We have this conversation, maybe you do with Rosetta. I can't imagine those who don't have faith and trust in the Lord, regardless of the outcome of tomorrow, that he's going to help take them through, he or she, or whatever you want to say, is to take them through today. And I feel like that's the most important thing, but I feel like I don't know where I'd be at if I didn't have a structured faith and some leadership and people I can lean on, like you and my coach and family and friends that are believers. I don't know. What do you say about that?
Well, I think what I hear in you is, I was going to pose this question to you and your audience here. What do you think is the most spiritual activity you can engage in? You don't get a long answer here, Mark, you get a word or two. What would you think? Just take a guess at what do you think what could be one of the most effective spiritual activities you could engage in that would help you make progress?
Prayer.
What comes before prayer?
Trust.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna not stress. Choosing
a choice. Yeah.
Making the choice to pray, making the choice to trust. We tend to think of when we're going to grow, we tend to think of, I have to pray more, I have to read the word more, I have to fellowship more. But what comes before all of that is I need to choose. And there's a great story in Luke chapter 10, where Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about many things, but Mary has chosen the better part. Mary has chosen the better part. And Joshua 24, verse 15, the people of Israel are about to cross over. And Joshua looks at them and he says, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. Choose. So choice always precedes growth. And I think that's something to think about. Like when someone asks me, I often get people who come alongside and want to say, like, Luch, can you help me grow? And I ask them, well, in what particular direction? Like, why? Like, how bad do you want to grow? Like, in what direction do you generally, when you say grow, what comes to mind? Like, do you have a picture of that? And usually they don't. They put the monkey on your shoulders. And my thing is, if there's a hunger there, like my vision is to help everyone I come in contact with, whether they believe or whether they're a novice on the spiritual bunny hill or whatever, it's to guide them into a growing relationship with Jesus. Guide them into a growing relationship with Jesus from whatever starting point. I tend to think of life as a journey. Journey is an overused word in the Christian life. Now we have churches called the Journey Church. But you start out life, you're on a physical journey. And then, you develop your physical journey, right? I just talked about sports. You were in sports. Like your physical just grows. It evolves with you. Actually, it grows by choices.
Yeah.
And then you have an intellectual journey. Your mind grows. Hopefully it grows as you go to school, you read books, you get education. And then there's a spiritual journey that for many of us gets left behind when, especially people like you and I grew up in a liturgical church, like at a certain point you get the freedom to decide what you're going to do with it. And for the most cases, a lot of people leave it behind. Even evangelical kids, after they graduate from their youth group, they get lost in college. Unless they make the choice to hook up with a group that will help them to grow. But what often happens is people are 35 or 40 years old with a 13-year-old view of God. That hasn't grown. So when I meet them, I want to know, if you want to grow spiritually, if you were there, what would it look like? And I have them paint a picture, and then I decide whether I can help them with that or not. I know what the tools are, but I need to know where they want to go and how they envision that.
It sounds really familiar with what I've done in my whole professional career as a fitness coach, trainer, coach, gym owner, to some extent. And I know the value of what we're talking about right now has exceedingly more value than somebody's health, but also to be a healthy, which part of the show, being a healthy, fit Christian, not saying you have to be a bodybuilder or some, cover model, but just to live out the pursuit God has for you. When you start to learn those things and start to draw closer, whatever that vision is for you, it's interesting you're sharing me with that and the faith, asking someone, well, where do you want to go? I find a lot of times people that I work with in their 40s and 50s, and when they get to the season I'm at in life, they still have a 13-year-old view on their health.
Yeah.
They can still eat like they can eat a whole pizza. They can eat as much ice cream. They can not exercise and, those things, and their health is going to take care of them. Like we were in sports, right? And I think even that's like a thing of the past, because kids don't have to do sports now. Like their schools don't have, at least here in the States. Now they do, but it's usually the extreme level. If you're buying into the all year round sport, and that's kind of different than at least what I was. I played a sport. I was done for the season. I played soccer, and then I did basketball in the winter, and then I did track. I didn't run long distance. I did the sprints, and I did track in the in the spring. And then the summertime we spent at the beach and we enjoyed. And I was a good athlete, but it wasn't like, that's just not the case anymore. Now it's either one extreme or the other. And I think it's the same in the faith journey.
Well, in this COVID world too, there's a minimalist. I mean, everything that's getting cut in the schools, we should be aware of this, is all the sports. And it was the sports that got a guy who limped mentally. Like I didn't have I mean, my mind developed after I became a Christian. After I started following Christ, I started reading. I realized that it says, love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. So I started reading like there was no tomorrow. Like I read and read and read, and my wife still can't believe that I read as much as I do. If you take a scan of my office, you'd see I have tons of books here, and I've gotten rid of a lot of them. But my son Vince became a reader. All my boys are readers, but it didn't come because I was born with that strength. It came, something was activated in me when the soul came alive, and it keeps coming alive. Like I was going to say, Soren Kierkegaard, the famous philosopher, said, "We create ourselves by our choices. We create ourselves by our choices," and I think we're always at choice, right? We're always at choice, and you've made a choice to develop your business with a strong faith component, and that's very evident to any of us who know you. But I think as I've evolved, Mark, as I've gotten older, I think in the early years of my faith growth and my mentoring others, I was very one-dimensional. Like I was very much about spiritual disciplines. If we just get all the spiritual disciplines right, everything's going to work out. And I realize I know people have big, fat Bible heads. You know, their heads tilt to one side or the other.
Sure.
And they're ugly. They're just ugly. And they're nasty sometimes, you know, because the Bible says knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Knowledge puffs up, love builds up. And so as I've gotten older, I realized faith has to be holistic. I think I've shared my 5 F's with you. I mean, this is a model that will help anyone who's listening today to even begin to put together a game plan for their own growth, like faith, family, fitness, finances, and friends. You can add whatever other F's you want, but I've helped people take a little inventory of themselves in those 5 areas and ask them, let's talk about your faith. What does your faith look like now? What do you want it to look like? What part will church have in it? What part will others have? Like, what kind of Bible do you want to read? What do you want to do? Bible? Like, just get into the details. And then, of course, family. Let's evaluate your marriage and how your marriage and your children are doing. Like, just do the work. Fitness. You know, the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. You know, one of the guys in our 7-figure men's group that you lead asked me a question about sexuality. What does the Bible say about sexuality? And I said, a hell of a lot. It says a lot if you want to know, but how badly do you want to know what it says about it? Finances, the faith informs. So I think those are areas that you could get some quick wins. You know, like if you wanted to start growing spiritually, begin to take those 5 areas and begin to just work on them, exercise those muscles. Does that make sense?
100%. And I've heard that before, but I'm glad you brought it up because I think for our viewers that are listening, whether you're catching this now live or on a replay later, is that it's so valuable because I think the first F for me, really the most important one right now, I try to lean on the most for all of the other F's is my faith. And I always like to think of like people like to put it on layers. Like you think of these splines. You put your faith at the top, and then you put your relationship with your spouse, and then your family. And I kind of like to think of it more as like the center, and then the center F being
Right.
your faith.
Everything's around
And
it.
everything is around it, and there is give and take. Like there's fluidity because sometimes your relationships are not going to be all online. But if your faith is lined up, those will work out. Finances, maybe you are in debt, maybe you came into your faith when you have a heap load of debt, and then that takes alignment. But without that center, kind of like that's the central unit, the foundation, if you will. And I lived my whole life on a different foundation. It was on a foundation. I do well. I study hard. I go to school. I get good grades. I get a job. I can make more money. I can step up that ladder. I can buy a bigger house. I can get a nice car. I can have a good family. And then those are all, they're not bad things, but they really were not I put those all at the center, and I didn't have God anywhere on the outside. I knew he was there. And if I'm good enough, I can maybe have, this life after, whatever that may be for people. But until I came to know that, holy mackerel, he wants to be at the center of all of this.
Yeah.
And to me, it literally, now it wasn't like it happened overnight. Like I surrendered my life and it didn't just happen. It happened because of the choices I've been making, not just a choice. I had to make that first choice to say, I want you in my life. I want this relationship. But then it required to continue making choices. And I say this to my kids. and you might have said this too. And it's been great as a parent. And I don't make all the best parenting decisions. My wife and I, we mess up all the time, and we've gotten all the advice. I mean, I said one of the things I've learned was I've shared, because my dad said this to me when I grew up. And he said, Mark, for all the choices you make, there will be repercussions. Just so be wise in the choices you make.
For sure.
I said that to my kids all their whole life. Hey, you want to hang out with people that are going this direction? Guess what? That's a choice you'll make. There'll be repercussions when you go in that direction. And that's something I could say as far as leadership goes, and maybe that's the next thing I want to share is, as from being a brother in Christ here, and just the time that I've had the privilege to spend with you, and what you've already poured into my life, and I know the lives of so many other men and even women as well in the mastermind, and I'm sure countless others, is the importance of leadership, not just in being led by somebody, but also the importance of the leadership you have for your family and your friends and neighbors and things like that. Any kind of like tips that you can give, or like really kind of main things to think about?
What? This is something that I think leadership is such a big, I err on the side of, I remember I took an expensive leadership course a couple of years ago with a coach. Cost me, I don't know, for me it was expensive, $6,000 for 18 months, and it was all online. And one of the things that Coach Chad out of North Carolina, Chad Hall's his name, he's a master coach. He said, and we did all these assessments, Myers-Briggs. I had done it, but we did them again. Thomas Kincaid wanted to deal with how you deal with conflict, like a battery of tests, assessments. And he said, Luch, and then he was analyzing all the students. And he says, Luch, when it comes to you, you come out really strong as an encouraging leader. That's good news. The bad news is I think you think that's not good enough, because I think you want to be a strategic leader. You want to be the visionary leader. You want to be all these other fill in the blank. Vince talks about the ruler leader, being the ruler. And I get the impression that you think being an encouraging leader isn't enough, but that's how you show up. And this was just a couple of years ago. And then another mentor of mine, Jim Peterson, who's 85, he's written 3 books, Living Proof, Church Without Walls, Lifestyle Discipleship, just a wonderful man of God. I introduced him once, and when he went up after I introduced him, he says, what I love about Lucho? He had been in Brazil, so they call Luciano Lucho. I love Lucho because he makes us all feel like family. And hearing this from 2 significant people, that was leadership. They led me. So sometimes leadership it can feel like it's a grind, like I got to lead people somewhere. But encouraging literally means to come alongside. And I'm a come alongside kind of leader for anyone who invites me to tag along with them. And once I'm tagging along with you, then you'll get the best of me. But so I would think, and I think I like to throw in the word blessing. You never hear any books about the leader as a blesser, but to bless people is to speak well of them, to inspire them, to encourage them. Yes, to make correction, but only after you've won the right to be heard. You don't come in correcting people as your first lead. So I think if people want to lead their neighborhood, lead their wife, lead their children, just show up as someone who speaks well of others. Be known as the person on the street. And God said that to Abraham, one of the first leaders of the Bible. He says, in you, Abraham and Sarah, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And if you trace Abraham and Sarah's life through the early chapters of Genesis, they just went around blessing people. And then when you have that as a foundation, then your leadership style will begin to emerge, right? Like there are people with certain skill sets.
Yeah, it's so true. And I hope if you're listening to this is resonating with you. And I think the big take home picture from our conversation today, one of the things that just keeps coming up is the choice, right?
Yeah.
We have choices in life. And I think sometimes our capacity, we think maybe that because we made certain choices in the past, maybe like whether it's regarding your health, whether it's regarding your faith or relationships, you made some maybe bad choices, because I know I've made some bad choices, that it's hard to turn in a different direction and making some new choices. And the good news is, right, part of the good news is that you can come to your faith, you can grow in your faith at any moment, anytime, literally starting right now, starting today, by simply making a choice. It could be about putting down your phone and picking up a Bible. It could be talking to a friend who is a believer, or it could be, just sitting in quiet or going for a walk on the beach and saying, God, I want you in my life, whatever that looks like, right? And
you know what my wife does on our street? My wife and I live in a new neighborhood. 99% of my neighbors are either Muslim or Sikh, like East Indian.
Right.
So you know what she does to lead the neighborhood? Every week she buys 18 nutty cones. Ice cream.
Ice cream.
And she gives them out to the 25 or 30 kids that are up and down the street. And we just sit out on the front. We have supper on our front porch. Awesome. And we just make ourselves available to people. We've had some dear women whose husbands have abused them come to us and tell us privately in their broken English, where do we go for help? Yeah. This is very basic stuff. This isn't leading an organization. This is just being a good neighbor. Yeah. But it takes self-awareness to realize that, like I often say, if your faith doesn't work at home, don't export it. I didn't say your faith has to be perfect at home, but it has to work. Like the other night, one thing I find with COVID, that COVID has really come between some families and friends, are strong opinions, whether you wear a mask or don't wear a mask, whether it's a conspiracy or whether it's truly medical science. Like, it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't, like, I got into a big argument with one of my sons. And I said something nasty to him, and he said it back, and then we hung up on each other. Well, my wife looked at me and said, this is where the rubber hits the road with your faith. You either are going to call your son and seek his forgiveness, or everything you teach and say is just hypocrisy. Well, within 10 minutes, took me 10 minutes. I picked up the phone. I said, it doesn't matter. By the way, it wasn't Vince. It doesn't matter whether I'm right or whether you're wrong, or whether you're wrong and I'm right, or the other way around. What matters is our relationship. I actually don't give a you-know-what about COVID. All I care about is our relationship. And I did you wrong. I hurt you. I crossed you. Will you please forgive me? Well, my son was so tripping over himself to forgive me. He said, oh, Dad, it's not, I didn't do so good either. I said, no, I blew it. To me, if a leader can't do that, if all you can do is lead from on high with pontifications, we don't need another pope. We got one pope. That's all we need. I just need you to make things right that you made wrong.
That's so good. And you know what? I think this would be a great place to close, just because it just goes in the title of this show being How to Live a Faith-Filled, Healthy, Fit Life. Now, there's a lot to what we talked about, but I think one of the things, and it's just one of these last things, aside from a choice, that's a choice you made, forgiveness. Like, to choose to ask for forgiveness. And the other thing is to be able to forgive others, right? There's a give and take. And the beautiful thing about faith is we learn about forgiveness because we're forgiven. And that's like that's the thing that gets me, is to think of how many times we're forgiven, even the times we're thinking of the thoughts that we shouldn't be thinking, or doing the things we shouldn't be doing, and we're still forgiven. But it's still a choice to acknowledge that he forgives you, right?
A little help from my wife too. I think that's
yeah, we got to thank Rosetta.
I got a couple of brothers in Christ that we just get together. We did it yesterday for 3 hours in Niagara Falls, and we don't censor each other. We allow each other to wallow in our bad stuff, and then we swallow it and we move on. We don't edit each other. We allow ourselves to get the crap out, but at some point you've got to swallow it, and you've got to make a choice to make things better. And you see, the person who won't seek forgiveness is the person who basically says, I don't actually value you. Because if I value my son, therefore I will lay myself down on the ground to beg his forgiveness. But if I don't value you, I'll say, the hell with it. I'm going to just slam the door. I'm going to walk away. And until he comes to me, we're done. See, that's not faith.
And it's hard. Like, it's I think a work in progress for all of us, believers and non-believers. it's totally a work in progress. So listen,
Yes, thank you.
I do. Yeah, I'll say, because I know we can talk forever and we just have it. So listen, I hope everyone on here got some value out of it. And Luch, I want to, before we close, where can people find you as far as to connect? I know you're on Facebook, but where else? Because you are a leadership coach.
I have a deliberateU.com. That's who I work for. I'm a coach. Deliberate you, the word deliberate, you like university.com.
Okay.
And that kind of talks about who we are, what we do. And but you can also reach me through Mark. And I'm on Facebook under Luciano Del Monte. I'm off Instagram. I find Instagram makes me stressed. So
Yeah, gotcha.
you don't need that instant information. So
People say that about Facebook as well, but I think it's all, again, it's who you choose to listen to and watch and spend your time with. And I just wanted to say
thank you very much.
So appreciative. Now, just to pay into this forward, it's time to bless somebody else. So if you're thinking of anybody, listen, if you're coming on this on a replay, that would love this episode. If it resonated maybe a little bit with you or a lot, and you feel there's somebody else, all I recommend, and just ask, that's all we ask, is that you just share this with one person. It could be sharing it on your own phone. It could be just sending it to a friend or a neighbor, or just, having a conversation about it as well. Truly, that's the value in the sharing, being together as a community, having relationships with people. And I know it's hard in this time of day age when we can't maybe hug people or maybe give them a kiss or give them a handshake, and it's a struggle. So I just want to encourage you, even though this maybe be screen to screen, if you found value, just to share this with somebody else. And at the end of the day, thank you so much for listening and sharing. Have an encouraging, healthy, and most important, very blessed day. Thank you so much, Luch. Appreciate all your time. Take care.
Thank you.